Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. Today, we're going to explore one of cryptozoology's most intriguing mysteries with 7 terrifying stories involving the Mothman. Get ready to hear chilling tales about this winged creature with glowing red eyes that appeared in Point Pleasant and continues to terrorize witnesses around the world. We'll dive into stories of mysterious apparitions, dark prophecies, and nocturnal encounters that have left deep scars on all who have experienced them. Oh, and before the Mothman appears to you, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel, activate the little bell, and leave your like. This helps the channel a lot and ensures that you don't miss out on any terrifying content like this. Let's go. 1. The warning on the bridge. The town of Point Pleasant in West Virginia has always been known for its legends and mysteries, but in December 2024, a series of unexplained events began to shake the tranquility of the residents. It all started when Sarah Jenkins, a 35-year-old teacher, reported seeing a strange figure hovering over the Silver Bridge during her evening walk. It was huge, with wings like a giant moth and glowing red eyes, she described, shivering. "I thought I was going mad." Over the next few days, more residents reported similar sightings. Truck drivers swore they had seen the creature flying alongside their vehicles as they crossed the bridge. Fishermen spoke of a winged shadow reflected in the waters of the Ohio River. Local authorities initially dismissed the reports as mass hysteria or foul play. However, when a video captured by a teenager showing a dark figure with huge wings flying over the bridge went viral on social media, panic began to spread. Mark Taylor, a retired engineer who had worked on the maintenance of the bridge years before, began to notice something strange. The creature seemed to be pointing at certain points on the structure, he observed, as if it was trying to show us something. Concerned, Mark tried to alert the authorities about possible structural problems, but was ignored. "It's just an urban legend," he was told. "The bridge has undergone recent inspections and is perfectly safe." On the morning of December 22nd, tragedy struck. The central span of the Silver Bridge suddenly gave way, taking several vehicles with it into the waters of the Ohio River. The disaster resulted in dozens of deaths and missing persons. Among the survivors was James Wilson, a bus driver who had crossed the bridge seconds before the collapse. "I saw that thing," he said, still in shock. "The Mothman was there, waving its arms like it was trying to stop us crossing. I thought it was a hallucination, but now..." Subsequent investigations revealed that the bridge had been overloaded beyond its capacity and that structural problems had been overlooked. The tragedy could have been avoided if the warnings had been taken seriously. In the months that followed, as the city struggled to recover, the sightings of the Mothman ceased. But the question remained, was the creature trying to warn of the impending disaster? And if so, why was no one able to understand its warnings in time? The mystery of the Point Pleasant Mothman joined a long list of similar legends around the world. For many residents, the bitter feeling remains that perhaps if they had paid more attention to the signs, the tragedy could have been avoided. Today, a memorial to the victims has been erected on the banks of the river, and a plaque reads, "For those we lost, and for the warning we failed to heed." And on dark nights, some swear they can still see a winged silhouette hovering over the waters, like an eternal, silent guardian. The town of Point Pleasant has continued to be visited by paranormal enthusiasts, all trying to unravel the mystery of the Mothman. But for the locals, the event remained a grim reminder that sometimes the clearest signs can be the hardest to interpret. Meanwhile, Mark Taylor couldn't stop thinking about what could have been done to prevent the tragedy. He began to study local legends more closely, trying to better understand the role of the Mothman in disastrous events. If we'd only listened, Mark whispered to himself, looking at the rebuilt bridge. If we'd only listened. And so the town of Point Pleasant continued to live with the shadow of the Mothman hanging over it, a constant reminder that in the world of mysteries, sometimes the truth is closer than we imagine, but still beyond our reach. In the years that followed, the city tried to rebuild its bridge and its confidence. But the question about the Mothman remained, hanging like a shadow over the community. Was he an omen, a warning, or just a legend? The answer, like the creature itself, remained a mystery. And so the story of the Mothman continued to be told in whispers, a reminder that in some places, the line between reality and myth is too thin to ignore. And on dark nights, when the wind blows over the Ohio River, some still swear they hear the sound of flapping wings, a distant echo of a warning that was never heard in time. Second red eyes in the field. One cold October night, Farmer Jack Harris noticed something strange in his cornfield. Red eyes glowed in the darkness, as if they were watching him. At first, Jack thought it was a wild animal, but the frequency of the sightings increased, and he began to feel a constant presence. "It's like something is watching me," he told his wife, Rachel. "And it's not just an animal, different." Over the next few days, animals began to disappear. First, a rooster disappeared, then a calf. Jack found huge footprints in the field, but no clear clues as to what could be causing the disappearances. One night, while patrolling the field with a flashlight, Jack saw the creature. It was tall, with huge wings and red eyes that shone like lanterns in the darkness. The Mothman, as Jack would soon discover, was hunting on his land. "He's not just after the animals," said Jack, terrified, after finding one of his dogs dead with human claw marks. "He's after us." Rachel, initially skeptical, began to notice changes in Jack. He was more paranoid, talking about the Mothman as if it were a constant presence in their lives. "He's trying to tell us something," Jack insisted, "but I don't know what." As the Harris family tried to understand what was going on, more farmers in the area reported similar sightings. The Mothman seemed to be moving from farm to farm, always at night, always watching. A team of cryptid hunters arrived in the region, equipped with night vision cameras and traps. They captured clear images of the Mothman, but he always seemed to be one step ahead. "He's not just an animal," said the team leader, a man called Mike. "He has an intelligence, almost human." As the fall progressed, the sightings increased. The Mothman seemed to be getting closer and closer to the Harris house. Jack began to notice that the apparitions coincided with strange events: sudden storms, power outages, and even a fire on a neighboring farm. "He's trying to prepare us for something," said Jack, increasingly convinced. "But I don't know what." On the night of October 31st, the Mothman appeared on the porch of the Harris house. Jack saw the red eyes fixed on him, feeling a strange sense of calm. "He's not here to hurt us," Jack whispered to Rachel. "He's here to show us something." The next day, a devastating storm hit the region, destroying farms and taking lives. The Mothman was not seen again, but the question remained: was he trying to warn of the disaster or just observing the course of events? While the Harris family rebuilt their lives, Jack couldn't stop thinking about the Mothman. Was he an omen, a warning, or just a legend? The answer, like the creature itself, remained a mystery. And on dark nights, when the wind blew over the cornfields, some still swore they heard the sound of beating wings, a distant echo of a warning that was never heard in time. In the years that followed, the region continued to be visited by enthusiasts of paranormal phenomena, all trying to unravel the mystery of the Mothman. But for the local farmers, the event remained a grim reminder that sometimes the clearest signs can be the hardest to interpret. And so the legend of the Mothman continued to be told in whispers, a reminder that in the world of mysteries, sometimes the truth is closer than we think, but still beyond our reach. Meanwhile, Jack Harris couldn't stop thinking about what could have been done to prevent the tragedy. He began to study local legends more closely, trying to better understand the role of the Mothman in disastrous events. If we'd only listened, Jack whispered to himself, looking out over the now empty cornfields. If we'd only listened. And so Iowa City continued to live, with the shadow of the Mothman hanging over it, a constant reminder that in the world of mysteries, sometimes the truth is closer than we imagine, but still beyond our reach. In the years that followed, the region tried to rebuild its confidence, but the question about the Mothman remained, hanging like a shadow over the community. Was he an omen, a warning, or just a legend? The answer, like the creature itself, remained a mystery. And so the story of the Mothman continued to be told in whispers, a reminder that in some places, the line between reality and myth is too thin to ignore. And on dark nights, when the wind blows over the Ohio River, some still swear they hear the sound of flapping wings, a distant echo of a warning that was never heard in time. The legend of the Mothman has become an integral part of local culture, a constant reminder that sometimes the clearest signs can be the hardest to interpret. And as the region continued to develop, the shadow of the Mothman remained a silent guardian of the mysteries that lie beyond human comprehension. 3. The Last Transmission. The Legend Hunters YouTube channel had amassed 1.2 million subscribers over the past 3 years, with its 3 presenters, Mike Donovan, Sarah Chen, and Tom Blackwood, investigating paranormal phenomena around the world. Their latest adventure has taken them to the infamous Hoia Baciu forest in Romania, known as the Bermuda Triangle of Transylvania, where recent reports have suggested sightings of a Mothman-like creature. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Europe's most haunted forest, Mike announced to the camera as the trio walked between twisted trees. The evening light filtered weakly through the dense vegetation. In the last 6 months, at least 12 people have reported seeing a winged creature with glowing red eyes. Sarah, the group's anthropologist and folklore expert, adjusted her electromagnetic measuring equipment. What makes these sightings fascinating is that the Mothman is traditionally associated with the Point Pleasant region in the United States. To find similar reports here, thousands of kilometers away, suggests a more universal phenomenon. Tom, who was responsible for the filming and audio, captured panoramic images of the forest while monitoring the live broadcast. We have almost 8,000 people watching now. The chat is exploding with theories. As night fell, the forest transformed. Shadows stretched between the trees, and indistinct sounds echoed in the growing darkness. The team set up night vision cameras in a 50-meter perimeter around their makeshift camp. According to the locals, Sarah continued, consulting her notes, the creature always appears around midnight, preceded by electronic interference and a feeling of atmospheric pressure. Mike smiled at the camera. That's why we brought all this equipment. If anything is here, we'll document it. At 23:15, the first incident occurred. All 4 perimeter cameras lost signal simultaneously. Tom rushed to check the main equipment. "We're having problems with the transmission," he reported, frowning at the monitors. "The connection is unstable." In the live chat, viewers began to report anomalies in the image, vertical and horizontal distortions that crossed the screen at irregular intervals. Some swore they saw a dark figure moving among the trees behind the team. "The temperature has dropped dramatically," observed Sarah, her breath visible in the night air. "From 12 degrees Celsius to 3 degrees Celsius in less than 5 minutes. Mike, always the skeptic of the group, tried to keep his tone light. "Probably just a local weather phenomenon. These mountain forests are known for—" A sound cut through the night. Not exactly a scream, but something between a low hum and an amplified whisper. The team froze. "Did you hear that?" whispered Tom, turning the main camera towards the darkness. Sarah pointed her flashlight at the trees. "There's something moving over there." On the live feed, viewers began flooding the chat with frantic messages. "Behind you. Red eyes to the left. Turn off transmission and run." Mike slowly turned around, his expression changing from skepticism to absolute horror. The camera captured the exact moment his face paled. "Sarah, Tom, don't move," he whispered. The main camera shook as Tom turned it to capture what Mike was seeing. For a brief moment, 2 bright red dots floated in the darkness, about 2 meters off the ground. Then something moved, a dark mass shifting between the trees. "That's him," murmured Sarah, her voice almost inaudible. "The Mothman." The transmission began to deteriorate rapidly. The image jumped and froze, the audio turning into static, interspersed with fragments of screams and the distinct sound of something large moving quickly among the vegetation. For a second, a single frame that would be obsessively analyzed by thousands of people over the following weeks, the creature appeared clearly, a humanoid figure over 2 meters tall, with huge moth-like wings stretched out behind its shoulders and red eyes that seemed to emit a light of their own. Its body was slender, almost skeletal, covered in something that resembled both skin and chitin. The last thing viewers saw was Mike running towards the camera, shouting something inaudible, before the broadcast cut out completely. Over the next 72 hours, Romanian authorities conducted an extensive search of the Hoia Baciu forest. They found the team's camp in complete chaos, destroyed equipment, torn rucksacks, and a trail of footprints that ended abruptly in the middle of a clearing. Of Mike, Sarah, and Tom, no sign was found. The latest broadcast of Legend Hunters became the most watched paranormal video in YouTube history, with over 40 million views in 1 week. Visual effects experts, biologists, and paranormal investigators have endlessly debated the authenticity of the images. A month after the disappearance, the channel received a single update, a 10-second video showing only static and an almost imperceptible whisper. "He's not just an observer, he's a collector." The origin of the video has never been determined. What's up, guys? The Mothman stories are chilling so far, aren't they? If you're enjoying these spooky tales, how about taking a quick break and subscribing to the channel? Just click on the subscribe button below and leave a like too. This really helps the channel grow and motivates me to keep bringing you more terrifying content like this. It's quick and makes all the difference. Now let's get back to our Mothman stories, shall we? There's still a lot of terror ahead. 4. The Messenger of Disaster. Eleanor Mackenzie has always had a sensitivity to the inexplicable. Ever since she was a child, she noticed things that others didn't. Shadows that moved when they shouldn't, whispers in absolute silence. But nothing prepared her for what began to visit her Victorian apartment in Edinburgh that particularly harsh winter. The first apparition occurred on a Tuesday in November. Eleanor woke up at 3:17 in the morning, awakened by a feeling of heaviness in her chest. When she opened her eyes, she saw a dark silhouette hovering near the ceiling of her bedroom. A humanoid figure with huge moth-like wings and red eyes that seemed to penetrate her soul. "Who's there?" she whispered, paralyzed with fear. The figure didn't answer. It just floated silently for a few seconds before fading into the shadows. Eleanor spent the rest of the night with the lights on, convincing herself that it had just been a vivid nightmare. The next morning, she received a call. Her younger brother, Ian, had been in a serious car accident in Glasgow. He survived, but would be recovering for months. Eleanor tried to forget the strange sight, attributing it to stress and coincidence. But 2 weeks later, the creature appeared again, this time reflected in the bathroom mirror while she was brushing her teeth. The same red eyes, the same huge wings. When she turned around, there was nothing there. That afternoon, her Aunt Margaret, who lived alone in Inverness, was found dead after a massive stroke. "It can't be a coincidence," Eleanor muttered to herself, frantically searching the internet for apparitions that preceded tragedies. It was then that she found reports of the Point Pleasant Mothman, a creature that supposedly appeared before the collapse of the Silver Bridge in 1967, resulting in 46 deaths. Over the following weeks, Eleanor meticulously documented each apparition and the events that followed them. December 12th. She saw the creature in the back garden, watching it through the kitchen window. The following day, the building where she worked suffered a fire that injured 7 colleagues. December 26th. The creature appeared in her room again, this time coming closer. 3 days later, her best friend was diagnosed with an aggressive brain tumor. January 3rd. She woke up with the feeling that someone was watching her and saw the creature standing at the foot of her bed. The next morning, she received the news that her father had been hospitalized with a heart attack. Eleanor began to question her sanity. Was it possible that this creature, this Mothman, was somehow connected to the tragedies in her life? Was he causing them or merely announcing them? Desperate for answers, she consulted Moira Campbell, an elderly woman known locally for her knowledge of Scottish folklore and paranormal phenomena. "In the Highlands, we have old stories about the messenger of destiny," explained Moira, pouring tea in her small room filled with old books, "an entity that manifests itself to those who possess what we call the sight, people able to perceive the veil between worlds." "But why does it appear to me?" asked Eleanor, shivering despite the warmth of the fireplace. "Perhaps it's not a question of why, but what for," replied Moira. "Some entities don't cause tragedies. They try to warn about them." This perspective changed everything for Eleanor. What if the Mothman wasn't a threat, but a messenger? What if, instead of running away from him, she should try to understand him? The following night, Eleanor prepared herself. She lit candles in her room, sat on her bed, and waited. At midnight, she felt the temperature drop dramatically. A shadow moved across the ceiling, condensing into the now familiar shape. "I'm listening," she said, forcing herself to keep her voice steady. "What are you trying to tell me?" The creature didn't speak, but came closer than ever. Its red eyes locked onto hers, and Eleanor felt a wave of images invade her mind. Visions of water, screams, people struggling to breathe. By the time she regained consciousness, the sun had risen. Eleanor immediately called her older sister, Catherine, who was planning to take her children on a boat trip on Loch Ness that weekend. "Cancel the trip," Eleanor begged. "Please trust me." Reluctantly, Catherine agreed. 2 days later, an unexpected storm hit the region, capsizing 3 tourist boats in the loch and causing 5 deaths. Over the following weeks, Eleanor developed a strange relationship with her nocturnal visitor. He kept appearing, always before tragedies, but now she understood his purpose. With every warning, she was able to intervene, calling friends at the right time, changing plans, sometimes simply being there when someone needed her. "He's not evil," she explained to Moira during one of her visits. "It's as if he exists on a plane where time is different. He sees what's going to happen and tries to warn us, the only way he can." "Be careful, dear," warned Moira. "Even messengers take their toll eventually." Moira's warning proved true one night in March, when Eleanor awoke to find the Mothman hovering closer than ever, his red eyes fixed directly on hers. The visions that flooded her mind were different this time. She saw herself, pale and motionless, in a hospital bed. For the first time, the creature communicated directly with her. Not in words, but in feelings, impressions that translated into a single concept: choice. Eleanor understood. The price for her ability to save others would be her own life, or she could choose to ignore the warnings, live normally, letting fate take its natural course for everyone around her. The next morning, Eleanor wrote long letters to her loved ones. Then she walked to St. Giles Cathedral in the center of Edinburgh, sat down on a bench at the back, and closed her eyes. "I accept," she whispered into the void. 3 days later, Eleanor Mackenzie was found in her apartment, the victim of a brain aneurysm that doctors described as practically impossible to predict or prevent. In her diary, found next to her bed, the last entry read, simply, "He does not bring death. It only illuminates the path we all eventually travel, and sometimes it offers us a choice about how and when we travel it." 5. The shadows on the highway. State Highway 87, which connects Phoenix to Payson in Arizona, has always been known for its wild beauty and natural dangers. Winding through canyons and desert mountains, the highway was often the scene of fatal accidents. But since February 2025, something more sinister has begun to haunt night travelers. It all started when William Church, an experienced truck driver, captured on his dashboard camera something that looked like a translucent figure standing on the side of the road near mile marker 200. It was around 2:30 in the morning. There were no other cars in sight, Church reported to the authorities. "I actually swerved the wheel to avoid hitting whatever that thing was." When Church reviewed the footage during his rest stop, what he saw baffled him. A humanoid figure, partially transparent, was clearly visible on the recording. "You could see the lines of the road through its legs, as if it were a ghost," he described. Over the following weeks, more drivers began to report similar sightings. Some described a winged figure perched on the lampposts. Others swore they had seen something huge flying over their vehicles. The description was consistent: a humanoid creature with huge moth-like wings and glowing red eyes. The local authorities initially attributed the reports to driver fatigue or light reflections until the accidents began. 3 cars inexplicably veered off the road in places where witnesses had reported sightings of the creature the night before. In each case, the survivors described seeing red eyes moments before losing control. The Arizona Department of Public Safety sent additional patrols to the problematic stretch of SR 87. Officer Miguel Ramirez was skeptical until his own experience during a night shift. "Something huge flew over my vehicle," he reported. "It wasn't a bird or a bat. It was too big, and it moved in an unnatural way." The situation came to a head when a school bus returning from an excursion almost plunged into a gorge after the driver swerved sharply to avoid what he described as a dark figure with huge wings standing in the middle of the road. Experts were called in to investigate. Dr. Jared Hogel, professor emeritus at the University of Arizona and an authority on Gothic literature, noted similarities with historical accounts of the famous Mothman from Point Pleasant, West Virginia, which supposedly appeared before the collapse of the Silver Bridge in 1967, resulting in 46 deaths. "There is a possibility of a natural explanation," commented Hogel, "but there is also the possibility of something supernatural. It's interesting to be on the border between these two possibilities without having to decide." Some locals began to speculate that the creature might be trying to warn of impending danger, pointing to the history of similar apparitions before disasters elsewhere. Others feared that the entity was actively causing the accidents. Despite multiple investigations, no physical evidence was found, only recordings from dashboard cameras showing indistinct shapes and consistent testimonies. The authorities installed monitoring cameras along the highway, but the creature seemed to avoid them. In April 2025, the Arizona Department of Transportation began safety improvement work on the most affected stretch of SR 87, citing public safety concerns without mentioning the sightings. Curiously, during the work, the sightings temporarily ceased. When the work was completed in May, engineers discovered significant structural flaws in a bridge that could have led to a catastrophic collapse if they hadn't been corrected. Sightings decreased after the repairs, but occasionally drivers still report seeing a winged figure watching the road from afar, as if it were standing guard over nighttime travelers on SR 87. The truth about the shadows on the highway remains a mystery. Is the creature an omen of disaster, a protective guardian, or just a modern urban legend fueled by fear? For drivers who cross that desolate stretch of SR 87 at night, the question remains open, along with their eyes scanning the horizon for shadows with wings. 6. The Silent City. The small town of Gallipolis, situated on the banks of the Ohio River, had always been known for its welcoming atmosphere and lively festivals. But when Daniel Mercer, an investigative journalist for the Chicago Tribune, arrived in September 2025, he found an unrecognizable community. The streets, normally bustling, were practically deserted after sunset. Restaurants closed before 6 p.m. Windows were covered with heavy curtains, and the few residents Daniel managed to approach answered in monosyllables, avoiding eye contact. "It's temporary," the hotel receptionist explained in a low voice. "Just don't go out after dark." Daniel had come to investigate reports of sightings of the Mothman, the legendary creature with red eyes and huge wings that decades before had terrorized nearby Point Pleasant, on the other side of the river. Over the last 3 months, more than 50 Gallipolis residents have reported encounters with the entity. At City Hall, Mayor Warren refused to discuss the matter. "There's nothing wrong in Gallipolis," he insisted, although his deep circles under his eyes and trembling hands told another story. "I suggest you finish your report and leave as soon as possible." At the municipal library, Daniel met Eleanor Hayes, an elderly woman who seemed less affected by the strange collective behavior. "It started in June," she whispered, nervously checking to see if anyone was watching them. "First, just isolated sightings. Then people started to change. They became different. Eleanor explained that the first people to see the creature developed a peculiar behavior. They became quiet, introspective, avoiding sharing details about their encounters. Gradually, more residents began to exhibit the same symptoms, even without reporting sightings. "It's as if something is spreading," she said. "Something beyond fear." Intrigued, Daniel began to map the sightings and behavioral changes. A pattern emerged. Encounters with the Mothman occurred mainly near the old abandoned radio station, on the outskirts of town. While visiting the site, Daniel felt a strange pressure in his ears, an almost imperceptible ringing. The station, decommissioned decades ago, seemed strangely preserved. At the back of the building, he found something disturbing. Dozens of identical drawings on the walls, concentric circles with an X in the center, similar to a stylized eye. That night, in his hotel room, Daniel woke up suddenly at 3:17 in the morning. A familiar hum filled the air and a sense of presence enveloped him. In the window, he briefly saw the outline of a tall figure with huge wings and glowing red eyes. The next morning, Daniel realized that he couldn't remember the encounter clearly. His notes seemed confused, and he felt an inexplicable compulsion to remain silent about what he had seen. Fighting against this influence, he sought out Eleanor again, who led him to a small group of resistance fighters, residents who for some reason seemed immune to the creature's influence. "The Mothman isn't just an omen," explained Dr. Harmon, a former psychology professor. "He's a psychic manipulator. It emits frequencies that affect the human brain, suppressing certain functions and amplifying others." "Like a mental parasite," added Sarah, a young physics student. "It feeds on collective fear, but it needs silence to maintain its control. That's why people stop talking about it." Daniel discovered that the old radio station functioned as an amplifier for the Mothman's transmissions. The creature had found a way to use the abandoned infrastructure to extend its influence throughout the city. "This isn't the first time," Eleanor revealed, showing old newspaper clippings. In 1986, a town in Russia near Chernobyl experienced similar phenomena before the disaster. In 2011, similar reports emerged near Fukushima. As Daniel delved deeper into his investigation, he felt the creature's influence growing in his mind. Intrusive thoughts, memory lapses, and a growing desire to abandon his research. In a desperate act of resistance, the small group planned to destroy the radio station. On the appointed night, as they approached the site, they saw the Mothman clearly for the first time. Not just a shadow or glimpse, but in its full form. A tall, thin entity with huge wings that seemed to absorb light and red eyes that didn't reflect but emitted a luminosity of their own. The confrontation that followed remains hazy in Daniel's memory. Flashes of light, muffled screams, and the sensation of alien thoughts invading his mind. When he fully regained consciousness, the station was in flames and Mothman had disappeared. Over the next few days, Gallipolis slowly began to awaken from its collective trance. People returned to the streets. Conversations resumed, although many could not clearly remember the previous months. Daniel never published his full report. His editor considered the story overly speculative and reduced it to a short note about mass hysteria in a small Ohio town. But before he left Gallipolis, Eleanor handed him one last newspaper clipping, a recent story about strange sightings in a small town in Maine. "It's just moved on," she said, "and eventually he'll be back." As he drove away, Daniel noticed a pair of red eyes watching him briefly from a distant hill. On the car radio, between stations, a familiar hum began to grow. 7. the watcher on the tower. The New River Gorge National Park has always been known for its stunning landscapes and dense forests that stretch for miles. With over 70,000 acres of wilderness, the park relied on its 7 strategically placed watchtowers to monitor fires and assist lost visitors. But that summer, something disturbing began to happen at the towers. Park Ranger Michael Harmon was the first to notice. During his night shift in the North Tower, he saw a dark silhouette hovering near the observation platform. The figure had huge wings and eyes that glowed with an unearthly red intensity. "I thought it was a big bird, maybe a barred owl," Michael reported to the head of the guards, Sarah Collins. "But no bird stands still like that watching. And the eyes, those red eyes, seemed aware." Sarah, a 15-year veteran of the park, initially dismissed the report as nocturnal fatigue. Michael was at the end of a double shift after all. But when Jason Ramirez, an experienced guard known for his skepticism, reported a similar sighting in the East Tower 2 days later, Sarah began to pay attention. "I was doing my routine check when I felt something watching me," explained Jason, visibly disturbed. "When I turned around, I saw this thing perched on the railing. It wasn't an animal, Sarah. It had a humanoid shape, but with huge wings, like those of a giant moth." Within 2 weeks, 5 of the 7 rangers had seen the creature, always near the watchtowers, always watching. The reports were consistent: a tall, thin figure with huge wings and glowing red eyes. "It's like it's studying our patterns," commented Robert Jenkins, the team's most senior guard, "learning our routines." The park, located less than 70 kilometers from Point Pleasant, carried the weight of history. Everyone knew the legends of the Mothman, who haunted the area in the 1960s, supposedly a harbinger of the Silver Bridge collapse that killed 46 people. When the first visitor disappeared, an amateur photographer called Derek Wilson, who had mentioned wanting to capture the sunrise from the East Tower, the authorities conducted extensive searches. They found only his damaged photographic equipment and, in the images recovered from the memory card, the blurred silhouette of a winged figure. "It could be anything," insisted the local sheriff, Thomas Grant. "A bird flying, a camera malfunction. We can't feed panic based on urban legends." But in the following weeks, 3 more visitors disappeared in similar circumstances. All had been camping alone in remote areas of the park. At each disappearance site, the guards found the same pattern: scattered equipment and strange marks on the ground. Not human or known animal footprints, but prints that suggested something large and heavy. Sarah, initially skeptical, began to investigate the historical accounts of the Mothman. She discovered that, in addition to Point Pleasant, similar sightings had occurred in other regions, often preceding tragedies. More disturbingly, some accounts suggested that the creature was not just a passive observer, but a predator. "It's hunting," Sarah concluded during an emergency meeting with her team, "and it's using our towers as observation points." The authorities considered closing the park, but the tourist season was at its peak, and without concrete evidence, such a decision would be economically devastating for the region. Instead, they implemented new rules. No one would be allowed to camp alone. All trails would be closed after sunset, and the watchtowers would receive additional security cameras. "This is ridiculous," protested the local tourism director. "We're scaring visitors based on superstition." One particularly dark night, Sarah decided to keep vigil in the West Tower, equipped with night vision and a high-resolution camera. For hours, nothing happened. Then, shortly after midnight, the electronic equipment failed simultaneously. In the sudden silence, Sarah heard the sound: a heavy flapping of wings unlike any known bird. When she looked up, she saw the creature landing on the edge of the platform. More than 2 meters tall, huge wings partially open, and those eyes, intensely red, fixed on her. The Mothman didn't attack. It just watched, as if evaluating. Sarah remained motionless, her heart hammering in her chest. After what seemed like an eternity, the creature spread its wings completely and disappeared into the darkness. When the equipment started working again, Sarah discovered that the camera had captured a single image before it failed, the clearest ever recorded of the Mothman. The photo showed a tall, thin figure with huge moth-like wings and eyes that seemed to emit a light of their own. The image was quickly classified by the authorities, who feared public panic. Officially, the search for the missing continued, attributing the incidents to attacks by wild animals or accidents in dangerous terrain. But the New River Gorge Rangers knew the truth. At night, when the camp lights went out, they could feel the red eyes watching from the towers, waiting, hunting. Sarah implemented a new protocol. No guard would work alone in the towers, especially after sunset. Redundant communication equipment was installed and additional cameras positioned at strategic angles. "We're not dealing with an ordinary animal," she explained to her team. "Whatever this creature is, it's intelligent and it's learning." Over the following weeks, the sightings continued, but no new disappearances were reported. The creature seemed to have retreated, observing from greater distances, as if respecting the new security measures or planning its next approach. When the summer came to an end and the flow of visitors slowed down, Sarah found an old family photo on her desk, a picture that hadn't been there before. On the back, written in strange handwriting, was a single sentence: "Some watch, others hunt, I wait." And so we come to the end of our 7 horror stories involving the Mothman. So, what did you think? Which story gave you the most goosebumps? Will any of them make you look twice at any strange shadow in the night sky? Let me know in the comments which one was your favorite. If you enjoyed this dive into the terrifying world of the Mothman, don't forget to leave a like. It really helps the channel grow and motivates me to keep bringing you more scary content like this. And if you're not subscribed yet, take the opportunity to subscribe now and activate the little bell